Welcome to Bad Guy Compendium, the ultimate podcast for fans of comic books, movies, and the unforgettable villains that make them unforgettable. I'm your host, Finley Strong. Magneto, one of the most complex and enduring characters in Marvel Comics, has been both a villain and an anti-hero, as well as a sometimes ally to the X-Men. Created by writer Stan Lee and artist Jack Kirby, Magneto first appeared in X-Men 1 in 1963, where he immediately established himself as the X-Men's primary antagonist. As the self-declared protector of mutantkind, Magneto has often been portrayed as a militant revolutionary, willing to use violence to achieve his goals. His powers of magnetism, allowing him to control metal and generate electromagnetic fields, make him one of the most formidable forces in the Marvel Universe. What sets Magneto apart from many other comic book villains is the depth of his motivations. His actions are driven by the trauma of his past, which includes surviving the Holocaust, witnessing the atrocities committed against his family and fellow Jews, and later in life, seeing mutants subjected to similar discrimination. Magneto's personal experiences with genocide have shaped his worldview, leading him to believe that humanity will always seek to destroy what it fears, in this case, mutants. His mission, therefore, is to ensure that mutants are never subjugated, even if it means resorting to violence and war. Magneto's philosophical and ideological rivalry with Professor Charles Xavier, the founder of the X-Men, is one of the central themes of the X-Men series. While Xavier advocates for peaceful coexistence between humans and mutants, Magneto believes that mutants must assert their superiority or face extermination. This dynamic has placed Magneto in direct opposition to the X-Men for much of his history, but it has also seen him align with them at times when their goals temporarily converge. Beyond the comics, Magneto has been a key figure in X-Men-related media, including animated series, video games, and films. His character has been portrayed in live-action movies by two iconic actors, Sir Ian McKellen and Michael Fassbender, further cementing his status as one of the most memorable and nuanced figures in superhero cinema. Magneto's origins and early history. The tragedy of Max Eisenhardt. Magneto was born Max Eisenhardt, a Jewish boy in Germany during the rise of the Nazi regime. His early life was marked by the escalating persecution of Jews, culminating in the horrors of the Holocaust. Max and his family were sent to the Auschwitz concentration camp, where he witnessed the brutal deaths of his family members. This trauma, coupled with the inhumanity he witnessed, became a defining moment in Max's life and shaped his deep mistrust of humanity. Max's latent mutant powers began to manifest during this time, though they were not fully developed. After escaping Auschwitz, Max began a new life, hoping to find peace, but the world's cruelty would continue to haunt him. Max fell in love with a woman named Magda, and together they had a daughter named Anya. When Anya was killed in a fire by an anti-mutant mob, Max, in a fit of rage, unleashed his full magnetic powers, killing the mob and destroying the surrounding area. Terrified of what he had become, Magda left him, and Max was left to grapple with the loss of his family once again. This combination of personal loss and deep-seated trauma informed Max's views on humanity's potential for violence and persecution. His experiences led him to adopt the alias Magneto and set him on a path toward protecting mutants at all costs. Magneto's ideology was grounded in his belief that humanity would inevitably seek to eradicate mutants, just as the Nazis had sought to exterminate the Jews. The rise of Magneto. Magneto's first major appearance as a villain occurred in X-Men 1 1963, where he made his debut as the leader of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. The Brotherhood, a group of mutants who shared Magneto's belief in mutant supremacy, became a central antagonist to the X-Men. Magneto's primary goal at the time was to declare war on humanity, establishing mutants as the dominant species on Earth. This early depiction of Magneto presented him as a somewhat one-dimensional villain, bent on conquest and revenge against humanity. However, even in these early stories, there were hints of the deeper motivations behind Magneto's actions. His desire to protect mutantkind and ensure their survival was rooted in his belief that mutants were inherently superior to humans and that peaceful coexistence was impossible. One of Magneto's defining characteristics during this period was his ideological conflict with Professor Charles Xavier, The two characters were former friends who shared a common goal, protecting mutants, but they had radically different approaches. While Xavier believed in peaceful integration between humans and mutants, Magneto saw violence and domination as the only viable solution. This philosophical clash between the two became one of the central conflicts of the X-Men series and served as a reflection of real-world debates about civil rights, resistance, and integration. Magneto's evolution: anti-hero and revolutionary. As the X-Men comics progressed, Magneto's character evolved, becoming more nuanced and morally complex. Rather than being portrayed solely as a villain, Magneto was increasingly depicted as an anti-hero, whose actions, while often violent, were motivated by a desire to protect his people from extinction. Over time, Magneto's character began to question his own methods and grapple with the consequences of his violent approach. Magneto's redemption arc. A significant turning point for Magneto occurred during the late 1970s and 1980s, particularly under the writing of Chris Claremont. Claremont, who is often credited with revitalizing the X-Men series, deepened Magneto's character by exploring his internal struggles and moral dilemmas. In Uncanny X-Men 150 1981, Magneto's humanity is revealed in one of the most important issues of the era. After a battle with the X-Men, Magneto nearly destroys a submarine full of innocent sailors. However, he realizes that by doing so, he would become no different from the oppressors who had harmed him and his family during the Holocaust. This moment of self-reflection forces Magneto to question whether his violent methods are justified. Shortly afterward, in Uncanny X-Men 200 1985, Magneto's redemption arc takes a dramatic turn. After being put on trial for his crimes against humanity, Magneto is given a chance at redemption by Professor Xavier, who is gravely injured during the trial. Xavier asks Magneto to take over leadership of the X-Men while he recovers, hoping that his old friend can continue to fight for mutantkind in a more peaceful and productive way. For a time, Magneto becomes the headmaster of Xavier's school for gifted youngsters and the mentor to the new mutants, a younger generation of mutants. During this period, Magneto attempts to honor Xavier's vision of peaceful coexistence, but he is constantly torn between his desire to protect mutants and his old habits of using force and violence. This era of Magneto's character development represents a shift in his role within the X-Men universe. Rather than being a straightforward villain, Magneto becomes a tragic figure, a man who has seen too much suffering and who is driven by both noble ideals and personal trauma. His actions, while often extreme, are motivated by his desire to prevent further persecution of mutants. Magneto's return to radicalism. Despite his attempts at redemption, Magneto eventually returns to his more militant ways. His disillusionment with peaceful methods grows as he witnesses continued prejudice and violence against mutants. This culminates in a storyline where Magneto takes control of the island nation of Genosha, a fictional country in the Marvel Universe that had long been a site of mutant oppression and enslavement. Under Magneto's rule, Genosha becomes a safe haven for mutants, a place where they can live free from human persecution. However, Magneto's leadership style is authoritarian, and he rules Genosha with an iron fist. His utopia is built on a foundation of fear and control, and his willingness to use force against both humans and mutants who oppose him once again places him at odds with the X-Men. Magneto's time in Genosha is a critical moment in his character's history because it reflects the tension between his desire for mutant freedom and his tendency toward dictatorship. While he genuinely wants to protect mutants, his methods often mirror the oppression he claims to be fighting against. Tragedy strikes when the island Genosha is destroyed in a genocidal attack by Sentinels, giant robots programmed to hunt and kill mutants. Magneto survives the attack, but the destruction of Genosha and the deaths of millions of mutants further harden his resolve. This event, known as the Genoshan Genocide, leaves Magneto more radicalized than ever before, convinced that humanity will never accept mutants as equals. Magneto in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Magneto's character has been brought to life on the big screen through the X-Men film series, with two acclaimed actors, Sir Ian McKellen and Michael Fassbender, portraying him in different time periods. Both actors' performances have been widely praised, with each bringing depth and complexity to the role. Sir Ian McKellen as Magneto. Sir Ian McKellen first portrayed Magneto in X-Men 2000, directed by Bryan Singer. McKellen's portrayal of Magneto was a more mature version of the character, emphasizing his ideological conflict with Professor Xavier, played by Patrick Stewart. McKellen's Magneto is portrayed as a man who has experienced great suffering and loss, and who is determined to protect mutantkind, no matter the cost. His version of Magneto is calculating, ruthless, and at times sympathetic, particularly in scenes where he reflects on his traumatic past as a Holocaust survivor. In the film's opening scene, a young Eric Lenscher, Magneto's birth name, is shown being separated from his parents at a Nazi concentration camp during World War II. This traumatic event serves as the foundation for McKellen's portrayal of Magneto's motivations. The film draws a clear parallel between Magneto's past and his fears for the future of mutants, positioning him as a tragic anti-hero rather than a simple villain. McKellen reprised his role as Magneto in several films, including X2 X-Men United 2003, X-Men The Last Stand 2006, and X-Men Days of Future Past 2014. In each of these films, Magneto's character grapples with the balance between protecting mutants and embracing more extreme, violent methods. His complicated relationship with Charles Xavier is a central theme throughout these films, as is his deep belief that humanity cannot be trusted to coexist peacefully with mutants. Michael Fassbender as young Magneto. In the prequel films, starting with X-Men First Class 2011, Michael Fassbender took on the role of a younger Eric Lenscher. Fassbender's portrayal focused on Magneto's early years and the development of his radical philosophy. First Class explores Magneto's origins in more detail, depicting his escape from the Nazis and his quest for revenge against the man responsible for his family's death, Sebastian Shaw, played by Kevin Bacon. Fassbender's portrayal of Magneto highlights the character's internal struggle between vengeance and Xavier's more peaceful approach to mutant-human relations. While Eric is motivated by a desire for justice and revenge, he is also deeply drawn to Xavier's vision of cooperation. However, by the end of First Class, Magneto fully embraces his role as a militant leader of mutants, adopting the iconic helmet that blocks telepathic interference and beginning his war against humanity. Fassbender reprised his role in X-Men Days of Future Past 2014, X-Men Apocalypse 2016, and Dark Phoenix 2019. Each of these films explores Magneto's evolution from a young man grappling with the trauma of his past to a seasoned revolutionary leader. The legacy of Magneto in film. Magneto's portrayal in the X-Men films has left an indelible mark on superhero cinema. Both McKellen and Fassbender brought different dimensions to the character, helping to solidify Magneto as one of the most compelling and nuanced villains in modern film. The films explore Magneto's motivations in a way that echoes real-world social and political issues, making him a character whose actions, while extreme, are grounded in a desire to protect his people from persecution. Magneto's philosophy and methods are often compared to the real-world struggles for civil rights and liberation, with his character representing a more radical, militant approach to achieving equality. In contrast to Xavier's nonviolent philosophy, Magneto's willingness to use force reflects historical debates within civil rights movements about the use of violence in the face of oppression. Significant comic book storylines featuring Magneto. Throughout the decades, Magneto has been featured in numerous key storylines that have explored his character in greater depth, expanded his mythology, and tested his relationships with the X-Men and the broader Marvel universe. Days of Future Past 1981. One of the most famous X-Men storylines, Days of Future Past, first appeared in Uncanny X-Men 141-142 1981 and was written by Chris Claremont. This storyline is set in a dystopian future where mutants are hunted and killed by Sentinels, robotic enforcers created by the government. In this future, Magneto is portrayed as an old man, one of the last surviving mutants, who has joined forces with the X-Men to stop the Sentinel program from eradicating mutant kind. The storyline is significant because it highlights the consequences of anti-mutant hysteria and the lengths to which both Magneto and the X-Men are willing to go to prevent this future from becoming a reality. The story was adapted into the 2014 film X-Men Days of Future Past, which combined both the original X-Men cast and the younger versions of the characters introduced in First Class. God Loves, Man Kills 1982. Published as a graphic novel in 1982, God Loves, Man Kills is another key storyline that explores the themes of prejudice and bigotry against mutants. In this story, Magneto and the X-Men join forces to confront the threat of Reverend William Stryker, a religious fanatic who seeks to exterminate mutants, believing them to be abominations against God. Magneto's role in this story is particularly significant because it shows him working alongside the X-Men to protect mutants. even as he continues to believe that his more aggressive approach is ultimately justified. The storyline emphasizes the deep philosophical differences between Magneto and Xavier, while also showing that they share a common goal: mutant survival. Fatal Attractions 1993. Fatal Attractions is one of the most memorable X-Men storylines of the 1990s. In this story, Magneto returns after a period of exile and once again takes control of his space station, Avalon. This storyline is notable for the moment in which Magneto uses his powers to rip the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton, leaving him near death and fundamentally altering Wolverine's character for years to come. The Fatal Attractions arc also explores the continuing ideological battle between Magneto and the X-Men, with Professor Xavier finally deciding that Magneto is too dangerous to live. Xavier uses his telepathic powers to shut down Magneto's mind, effectively leaving him in a vegetative state. This moment marks a turning point in the relationship between Xavier and Magneto, as Xavier is forced to confront the moral implications of his actions. House of M 2005. The House of M storyline is a crossover event that has lasting consequences for the entire Marvel Universe. Written by Brian Michael Bendis, the story centers on Scarlet Witch, Magneto's daughter, who suffers a mental breakdown and alters reality to create a world where mutants are the dominant species and Magneto rules as the King of Genosha. House of M explores Magneto's relationship with his children, particularly Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, and examines the consequences of his militant ideology. The storyline ends with Scarlet Witch uttering the phrase "no more mutants," which leads to the decimation of the mutant population, reducing their numbers to only a few hundred. Magneto Testament 2008. Magneto Testament is a limited series that explores Magneto's origins in greater detail than ever before. The series, written by Greg Pak, follows young Max Eisenhardt through his experiences as a Jewish boy during the Holocaust, from his time in the Warsaw Ghetto to his internment at Auschwitz. The story focuses on Max's survival and the horrors he witnesses, providing a deeper understanding of how these events shaped his worldview and ultimately led him to become Magneto. Magneto Testament is a powerful exploration of trauma, resilience, and the impact of systemic violence on individuals. Magneto's impact on popular culture. Magneto's influence extends far beyond the pages of comic books and the frames of superhero movies. His character has been a source of inspiration for various works of fiction, particularly those dealing with themes of discrimination, resistance, and leadership in times of crisis. The civil rights analogy. Magneto's relationship with Professor Xavier has often been interpreted as an allegory for the civil rights movement. Many fans and scholars have drawn parallels between Magneto's militant approach to mutant rights and the more radical elements of real-world social movements. Similarly, Xavier's philosophy of peaceful coexistence has been compared to the approaches of leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., while Magneto's willingness to use violence is often likened to figures like Malcolm X. This comparison has made Magneto a compelling character for readers interested in social justice and civil rights. His belief that mutants must defend themselves by any means necessary resonates with those who argue that marginalized groups must assert their power in the face of systemic oppression. Magneto as a tragic anti-hero. One of the reasons why Magneto remains such a beloved character is his portrayal as a tragic anti-hero. His backstory as a Holocaust survivor gives his actions a level of sympathy and complexity that many other comic book villains lack. While his methods are often extreme and morally questionable, his motivations are rooted in real-world experiences of trauma and loss. This complexity has made Magneto a popular figure, not just in superhero fiction, but also in discussions about ethics, leadership, and the psychology of trauma. His character serves as a reminder that the line between heroism and villainy is often blurred, particularly when it comes to issues of justice and survival. Representation in video games, animation. Magneto has been a recurring character in various forms of media beyond the comics and films. He has appeared in several animated series, including the X-Men animated series from the 1990s, which introduced a new generation of fans to his character. The animated series often portrayed Magneto as a nuanced villain, emphasizing his ideological conflict with Xavier and his desire to protect mutants from harm. Magneto has also been a playable character in numerous video games, including the popular Marvel vs. Capcom fighting game series. His powers of magnetism make him a formidable opponent in these games, and his presence has helped solidify his status as one of Marvel's most iconic characters. Magneto is one of the most complex and compelling characters in the Marvel universe, evolving from a standard comic book villain into a nuanced anti-hero whose motivations are deeply rooted in his personal experiences of trauma, loss, and survival. His ideological conflict with Professor Xavier has been a defining element of the X-Men series, reflecting real-world debates about resistance, civil rights, and the use of force in the face of oppression. Over the years, Magneto has been portrayed in various forms of media, including comic books, films, animated series, and video games. His character has been brought to life by two legendary actors, Sir Ian McKellen and Michael Fassbender, each of whom has added depth and complexity to the role. Magneto's legacy as a character extends beyond superhero fiction, resonating with audiences who see him as a symbol of resilience, resistance, and the complexities of leadership in times of crisis. Whether portrayed as a villain, a hero, or something in between, Magneto's impact on popular culture and the Marvel Universe is undeniable, and his story continues to captivate audiences around the world. Subscribe to Bad Guy Compendium anywhere you get your podcast or at roguemedianetwork.com and get ready to delve into the minds of the most iconic villains in pop culture history. I've been your host, Finley Strong, and remember, evil never sleeps, but bad guys are forever.